What is the intellect? The intellect is part of what I feel is the human spirit body that allows the human being to compare and contrast known things. That means in order to engage your intellect, you have to be aware of what you are comparing and contrasting. I feel the intellect is oftentimes very limiting for us. And I also feel that we humans are operating at a very low capacity. Even so-called highly intellectual people oftentimes are so blind and in denial about the reality of this place that they can't even recognize basic truths, right? So like one thing that is very striking to me is that our water systems are polluted in, well, everywhere. You know, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and guess what? The water is polluted with something called Gen X and other things. They are perfluorinated so-called forever chemicals that are byproducts of Teflon manufacturing from a company called Chemours, which used to be a subsidiary of the DuPont Corporation. Okay? Now, you will have so-called scientists coming up with ways their intellect is twisting around the notion that consuming these materials does not harm us, or that putting these materials in our waterways is totally fine, okay? Obviously they're lying, but you've got a situation where the public will believe what they're saying because they do not have an imagination, understanding of like basic truths that like, you know, clean water is pretty important, you know? Like we are more or less 75% water. So how is it that like any industry is more important than human beings having clean water? That's just one example of how highly intellectual people will justify their non-loving behavior because they've got addictions, right? They use their intellect to compare and contrast. Their imaginations, which I'll talk about in the next video, are so weak that they can't even conceive a pleasant reality that doesn't involve polluting this place. So, when a person wants to increase their intellect, right, I feel the way to do that is by having emotional experiences, primarily releasing our grief, okay? So if you can think of, like, let's say, for example, that I'm in a completely dark room, okay? But I've got a light, and everywhere I go, I'm discovering new space, and it stays illuminated, okay? But if my circle of illumination is only this big, then my intellect will be limited to this, what I know and what I can compare and contrast in any particular situation. To increase the intellect, I feel we have emotional experiences, we release our grief, which I believe hinders our energetic flow and creates situations where we cannot compartmentalize the different aspects of ourselves. So the various traumas that we experience from childhood growing up affects every part of us, including our intellect. So if we are able to have faith, which I'll talk about in a later video, and step forward into the emotional darkness and illuminate new aspects to expand our circle, we gain intellectual intelligence. And the intellect, that the most loving thing from the creator's perspective is always the most intelligent. I am interested in regenerative agriculture because I'm very passionate about our food systems and food supply. And one thing I'm doing is I'm building natural systems on my property in order to create a microbiome. That means no-till, but it also means patience, right? So what makes more sense? Should I go out there with a rototiller and till up my entire ground and kill all of the tiny little microorganisms that live there? Or do I add lots of organic material and some other things and let nature do its thing? Since we're talking about regenerative agriculture, I just want to say that the microbiome of bacteria and fungi grow off in complexity of each other and form networks of communication which facilitate nutrient flow to plant life. There is a symbiotic relationship with all life, and we humans act like every aspect of life is our enemy. Okay? Again, using the intellect, we refuse to acknowledge the truth that we are living out of harmony with love in almost every single area. But that being said, if you allow yourself to work through your various layers of emotions on any given topic, you will become more intellectually smart.